introduce my wife, Carol, standing over here. And our granddaughter, Linda, is with us today, one of our 18 grandchildren. Thank you. Well, somebody told me there was a little bit of competition tonight and maybe nobody would show up. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for coming. But if we're correct, the cause of liberty will be remembered for a long time and a ball game will be forgotten. This is very nice, and of course you know that reception has been excellent and across the country and on the colleges in particular. But every once in a while we come up short on the coverage. You know, evening news doesn't seem to cover what we're doing. And when they do, they come up with headlines. Where's Ron Paul? What is he doing? What's he doing these days? Where's the media? That's what we want to know. They claim they don't hear from us, but I think there'll be a recording or two, and maybe they will hear from us. Eventually, they must hear from us because we cannot continue what we have today. I think this is why the country is so different from 4 years ago. We were in a campaign 4 years ago, and I considered it very successful. But there's a dramatic difference between now, today, and 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there were not that many people who had an interest in the Federal Reserve. Today, it's a really big issue. For the first time in the history of the Federal Reserve, monetary policy in the Federal Reserve is one of the big issues of the campaign. We pass a bill that repeals the Federal Reserve Act. Surely if that isn't done immediately, what has to be done immediately, and the country now is very much with us, let's get a full audit of the Federal Reserve and find out what they've been doing with our money. Secret for a long time. Of course, I can understand why they would want to when you find out what they're up to. But they would like to continue to operate in secret because I think they do know deep down in their hearts, the people that are in charge, it's a totally unconstitutional organization. There's no authority in the Constitution for a central bank. And Congress has a responsibility of oversight of those creatures that they bring about. So oversight is a natural thing that we should have. What we need is a lot more transparency of the government and a lot less of the invasion of our privacy. Stable prices. Well, they haven't been doing so well, and as years go on, it gets worse. They're down to a 2-cent dollar compared to the dollar of 1913 that they were entrusted to. So the unemployment rate, when you look at it honestly, it's closer to 20% than the 7 or 8 or 9% that they claim. There's no such thing that we've experienced for a long, long time with stable prices. So I would give the Federal Reserve a very, very low grade. I would think, I don't know whether it's an F or an F minus, but it's very bad. One thing that we have to understand about monetary policy is if we oppose big government, which I'm assuming that just about everybody in this audience is opposing big government. Having big government and having government do the things that it's been doing for so long is always at the expense of liberty. So if you advocate big government, you always have to sacrifice some portion of our personal liberty. So this is the reason that if once you come around to endorsing the basic principle of liberty, you have to be in opposition, to big government and the financing of big government through the Federal Reserve System. What would happen if you didn't have the Federal Reserve to facilitate big government is the government would have to pay their bills. And if they didn't have enough taxation, they would have to borrow the money. But if you didn't have the Fed to buy the debt, then it would stop, because if they were spending too much, interest rates would go up and they would recognize that we can't afford it. The fact that you can borrow, and we have been sort of given the blessing of a reserve currency, it has allowed this borrowing to go on too long and the inflation to go on too long. But what has happened in these last 4 years is that the attitude has changed. The people are waking up in two areas. The economic crisis has hit. People know that we're not going to come flying out of this, that we have to have structural changes, and they're also fed up with our foreign policy, and they want our troops to come home. They want to paint you as being un-American, unpatriotic, and not caring about the troops. If they ever say that to you, ask them why the active military personnel donates more money to our campaign than all the other campaigns put together. Fighting these wars, going over there 3 and 4 and 5 times, they know what it's like. It's one of the, psychologically, it's one of the most overbearing wars that we have ever been in. Even in World War II, the length of time that our soldiers were exposed to potential immediate danger was very short compared to what's going on now, and you add this up. And it is understandable why so many are coming home. Not only do they have head injuries, but they have this post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's real, and they're suffering for it. We now have an epidemic of suicide. We're losing more of our military personnel from suicide from the fighting over there. But it's deeply flawed in foreign policy, getting individuals involved in wars that have not been declared, they're not moral, they're not constitutional, and it doesn't make sense. We don't know why we're there. We don't know why it's in. Why does somebody want to go over there and get shot at and get killed and see no end to it? It's very frustrating, and that is the reason if we care about our active duty people, if we care about our national defense, if we care about our veterans, we change our foreign policy and defend this country and not be the policemen of the world. To our debt. This means that $4 trillion would have been spent here at home. It would have been our money. We wouldn't have had borrowed. We wouldn't have had to print it. We wouldn't have had the inflation. We wouldn't have as much complication with the business cycle. But it is driving us into deep debt. And all great nations who overextend themselves overseas and develop empires, they always come down because they become arrogant and they stretch themselves too thinly around the world. And today, unfortunately, our declaration of war is this declaration of war, of the global war on terror. And it has been announced that it's every place, anytime, in any country that we have assumed that we have the moral authority to drop missiles and bombs and drones in any country. And believe me, they don't like it. And the other people resent it, and they would like it much better if we promoted our goodness by setting a good example here at home, having an opinion. Any other country ever invading us and attacking us. We are by far the strongest ever in the history of the world. We have more weapons than everybody else put together, and we have an efficient army if they have to fight. But our problem isn't a foreign invasion. Our problem is the other half of our oath of office when we swear to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. After the disastrous war in Vietnam, during the period of time I was in the military, I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban crisis and was in for 5 years. But after the war finally ended in Vietnam, and obviously without victory for us, after losing 60,000 Americans, over 1 million Vietnamese died, and how many wounded we have, and all the money we spent, which ushered in a whole decade of economic crisis in the 70s. But shortly after the war ended, a colonel for us, an American colonel by the name of Harry Summers, met with a Colonel Tu, who was Vietnamese. And they got together and they were talking and they were cleaning up the mess, and these are the rules, and we were leaving, this sort of thing. And our colonel said to the Vietnamese colonel, and said, you know, you never defeated us once on the battlefield. We always won militarily. And you know, Tu said to him, he says, you are right, but it's irrelevant. Because he did not understand, we didn't understand then, and we don't understand now. We can have a military power, and we can bomb and kill and occupy and pretend we're democratizing these countries, but what is much more important is winning the hearts and the minds of the people. And you can't do that. You can't destroy the ability of people to want to take care of their homeland. The whole idea of the Taliban is not to be anti-American. They're anti-occupiers. We worked with the Taliban when the Soviets were occupying Afghanistan, and now we're on the receiving end of it. We have a struggle for power. We have politicians, a few of them running for president, and the goal is, in both of the major parties, is to obtain power. Is to seek power and control and serve the special interests. It's not so much as a difference between their two philosophies. They have their special interests. The Federal Reserve protects both sides, and yet there is a struggle for power. That is real. That is a real program going on, and that is what they pretend they're different. But today it's different. It's only about power because there's no wealth there. This is the reason why there's no budget resolutions even come to the floor anymore, because there's no money left, and they don't know what to do, and they won't admit it. But I'll tell you what, they're struggling over power, and that's what politics has been about for so long. But guess what? Being involved in the campaign for liberty, in which we are doing, we are winning the hearts and minds of the American people. There is no doubt in my mind there are revolutionary changes going on, and they're intellectual ideas that are changing. They're not brand new, but they're improved over the ideas that